What do you think are the main motivations behind these recent aggressions by the Israeli and US regimes against Yemen?
Well, both the Israelis and their masters, their Anglo-American masters, are concerned at the increasing role that Yemen and its armed forces are playing in the region when they are trying to basically submit all of the other countries. They tried to invade Lebanon, that failed. They had a great success in Syria, but they really haven't been able to deal with the courage and the brazenness of the Yemeni armed forces and their attempt to enforce their obligations under the Genocide Convention to prevent supply of the regime and furthermore to drive the Anglo-American ships out of the Red Sea. So the Israelis see Yemen as a thorn in their side and they want to deal with it, but the only way they have is really by the air, by air raids, by bombing. There's no possibility of them carrying out any other sort of military operation. We saw they didn't get very far with Lebanon. Of course, in Syria the situation was different, but we can expect they're going to try and bomb from the air. That's what they do. That's mainly what they're able to do these days. But the Yemenis are waiting for them. People are not aware of the level of technology or the technological development of the Yemeni military, and that has some surprises in store for the Israelis, I'm sure.
The Yemenis are ready to retaliate. What will be the long-term consequences of such escalation for both the US and Israel? Also, we know that the US new government is about to come into power. So are they ready to enter a full-scale war in Yemen?
I'm sure they don't want to. They might like someone else to deal with it. But the problem is some of the adversaries of Yemen, like the Emiratis, for example, not too long ago, concerned about the exchange between the Israelis and Iran, wanted the US planes out of the base in Abu Dhabi, for example. And I believe that the US planes went from Abu Dhabi to Qatar, which is, of course, the biggest air base the US has in the region there. Of course, your other correspondent mentioned Bahrain too. That's a big naval base there. So there are US targets, let's say, for the Yemenis or for Iran if there's a wider war in the Persian Gulf. And I think the US is very concerned not to unnecessarily inflame that. Of course, from the Israeli side, the Israelis have been doing everything they can to try and inflame the situation. So, of course, the pressure that the Yemenis are placing on with their attacks on military installations in Tel Aviv, for example, is something that's an additional pressure on the regime, which may lead to the collapse of the regime in occupied Palestine. I think we should start calling it a transitional regime in Tel Aviv, like they've begun to call the regime in Damascus.
Very interesting to get your perspectives, gentlemen. Tim Anderson, Director for the Centre of Counter-Hegemonic Studies from Sydney.